Here's the thing. Black Adam is not terrible. Black Panther Wakanda Forever is not great. Both movies are fine.
Are you kidding?
I stopped using Rotten Tomatoes years ago because these niggas will have you believing that Thor Love and Thunder, Multiverse of Madness, and Black Widow are better than Black Adam. Spoiler alert, they are not. All of this to say that contrary to what people and maybe even critics think, there's more than one way to make a good movie. Black Panther easily sits as the third best MCU film since 2019, just behind Shang-Chi and Spider-Man No Way Home. I wasn't actually a fan of the first film, but then somehow this film managed to make me appreciate the one that came before it even just a little bit more. I'm not a fan of the MCU, Black Panther, or Chadwick Boseman. If you're a fan of any of those three things, you will probably have a very different experience watching this movie than I did. Now onto the characters of this film. Namor is easily the MVP of this film for me. In many ways, he's exactly what Black Adam should have been. The character was played almost to perfection by Chuekjai, who is someone I've never heard about before, but he needs to get more movies. I thought the story behind this character's name was pretty interesting, even though as someone that comes from cartoons, it feels kind of unnecessary. But the character's motivation, the performances, his relationship to the protagonist of this film, everything in that aspect was done pretty well. And then Queen Ramonda is a close second. Angela Bassett easily delivered the most compelling performance of anybody in this film for me. The emotion to her character, the authority with which she spoke. She was a very exciting character to watch for most of the film. Shuri, as played by Letitia Wright, was also a very, very well handled character in this film. Her personal story arc is probably easily the best part of the story of this film for me. Although I think there were a few leaps in logic for us to arrive at where we arrived.
And honestly, as much as I hate to say it, I can't really get behind the idea of her as the Black Panther.
M'Baku is a genuinely amusing character, and as an African, Winston Duke's portrayal of M'Baku feels the most African to me, so he's a personal favorite of mine in this film. The other really interesting thing about this film for me was the visuals. If not for the parts of the film in the beginning that were a little too dark for me to see anything, this will probably be my best looking film of Phase 4. Of course, I'm not entirely sure if my inability to see what was going on is the film itself or the cinema I went to. Genesis Cinema sucks. There's a way the colors in this film feel very appropriate for the type of film it is. Although I have to ask, what the is up with all the Power Ranger shit? The Midnight Angels costume thing was between Tony Stark, Rudy, Rescue, Ironheart, Iron Spider, and these guys. I think we've had more than enough of this whole aesthetic. I thought the new Black Panther suit was just a little bit over-designed, and Ironheart looks like a toy. Speaking of Ironheart, Riri Williams as a character feels very out of place in this story, and I think one of the worst things you can do when you have a character that feels out of place in a story is to make them a plot device. Because now it is somebody we don't care about being made needlessly important to the story. The story of this film is easily what I least liked about it. The dialogue is brilliant, I'll give it that. And the delivery by most of the actors seems to elevate that. But the story was probably at its best at the beginning, and then over time, I don't know, it becomes a little bit messy. About halfway through the film, it becomes obvious that they are just trying to make sure it ends in some sort of war. And in the quest to arrive at that plot point, some of the characters make a bunch of questionable, maybe even stupid decisions. And then the music. I think if you like the album, you're going to enjoy the film. When I was in theaters, the guy beside me was dancing throughout the entire movie. I'm like, we get it. You've listened to the album. Now, on to the biggest weakness of this film, the action. None of the fights in this film were it for me. In the first film, I didn't really enjoy the fights, especially the final one. The CGI was very messy. But here, the CGI is messy. It's just like the fight choreography, I guess. It's very lackluster. The fights all feel very, very mid. The third act ones were by far the worst. There were bigger stakes in the fights in the middle of the film. I don't know, it's just the battle planning, whatever, it doesn't quite add up. It's a superhero movie. You can't miss on the action. You need to get someone from like John Wick or some shit. I've seen some talk in different places about how where are the men in the film and all that drama. I don't know if everybody else missed the fact that in the first film there were essentially 4 male characters. 2 have died. 1 is MIA, and then the last one was here. What more do you want? I don't really have a problem with female-led films or female characters as long as they're not making narrative choices around the gender of the character. I find it very cringe when in like Captain Marvel, a huge plot point of that film, if I remember correctly, was that she was a woman. In a male-infested group, I guess. No offense to you guys, but you make blockbusters. You're not going to give us any meaningful commentary on anything political, so just stop it, please. So now on to Black Adam. Its only real strength is the action. And it's a Dwayne Johnson-led film. The only thing you can really truly expect from a Dwayne Johnson film is the action is going to be decent, if not great. Okay, no, never great. I don't think that's ever been great. I watched Black Adam before I watched Black Panther. The performances in Black Adam just felt lackluster to me. And then this is highlighted when you actually watch Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Even if you don't know anything about acting, the performances here, the only exception probably being Pierce Brosnan. From what I gather, he once played James Bond, so fair enough, that's to be expected. Dwayne Johnson does his usual thing, which is never laughably bad, or it's rarely ever laughably bad, but it's never great. And with a character like Black Adam, you would hope for more compelling performances. Side note, I've heard rumors about how Dwayne Johnson supposedly has some stipulations in his acting contract that he can't lose for some reason. I don't know how true that is, like I said, there are rumors, but if it is true, whoever agreed for Dwayne Johnson to play Black Adam is a complete idiot. Even if he wanted to do what the MCU is doing with Loki with Black Adam, he still has to lose at least once. Loki lost in 2 movies before he went on his whole redemption shit. Black Adam is hard to sell as an anti-hero in this film because he doesn't really do anything bad. I was like, oh, he kills bad guys. MCU heroes, DCU heroes have been killing since the inception of their respective universes. And that might actually be part of why they did the JSA being neo-colonial enforcers BS. Like I said with Black Panther, you're a blockbuster movie. It feels like political awareness for political awareness sake. Just stop. The funniest part about Black Adam is that the story is a mess, but the story actually makes sense. It's just that there's too much in one film. There's a good 2 to 3 movies worth of stories. There's Black Adam's origin story, which actually had an interesting twist to it, but these buffoons spoiled that twist in the first trailer. Okay. There's a whole occupation of Intergang and how that culminated, in a sense, sort of tied back to Black Adam's origin. And then there's Black Adam versus the JSA, which also offers the opportunity to introduce the JSA in their own film or something. And what ends up happening, because there's too much going on, most of the dialogue in this film ends up being exposition. And that's aside from the fact that most of the dialogue is so cringe. Who wrote these? And the good thing about it is that, as mismanaged as the story was, there's still a lot of potential in this film. It's still a moderately enjoyable watch. There's still characters and storylines that would be interesting to follow from here, provided that someone else writes it. But the bad thing about it is that Black Adam and everything in this film is intellectual property of Warner Brothers. They're either going to be too chicken shit to move forward with a film that's financially underperformed, or they will continue to mismanage it. As for the characters, like I said, Black Adam was a far cry from anything he should have been. He's barely a character. Most of his development is done through voiceover narration type of shit. The JSA already felt pretty out of place in this story, but Dr. Fate and Hawkman to a certain extent are forgivable. Atom, Smasher, and Cyclone, complete waste of space. You pretty much get everybody's backstory through one line of dialogue. Hawkman didn't even get a generic one-line description. We barely know anything about him except he's not afraid to die for some reason. If you're a comic book or cartoon person, you know the reason. Like, apart from the fact that, like, there's no reason why you should randomly make Hawkman black in a team that already has at least one black character that would have probably even be more interesting to see in this film. My biggest issue with Aldis Hodge as Hawkman, and I love Aldis Hodge from The Invisible Woman, my biggest issue with having him as Hawkman is that why the hell would you take Hawkman, one of your most, maybe not most interesting, but one of your more distinct characters, and then make him more like Falcon? He's basically Falcon with bigger wings and an uglier helmet at this point. And then Dr. Fate, I called him Dr. Strange, which is more to the problem. Dr. Fate is the guy who supposedly has godlike powers. And then here they basically made him a Dr. Strange ripoff, just doing shadow clone and mirror dimension shit. They are too near to their MCU counterparts. Everybody's costume looks great until they're in motion. I think the only person that consistently looked good while he was actually moving and in action was Atom Smasher. Probably because he's so big and slow, right? Okay, and then Black Adam, definitely. But Hawkman, I mean, what the fuck is this? The action mostly delivered across the film. The visuals, even though it gets wonky a lot, it has its moments. Although I would ask that you leave the slow motion to the professionals. And then the whole Quicksilver type scene that they did in the first few minutes. Stop. Black Adam borrowed too much visually from other superhero films. There's something that reminds me of Captain America, there's something that reminds me of Man of Steel, there's something that reminds me of X-Men. It's like, why? I don't know if other people have as much of a problem with this, but I remember one of my friends told me that he thought Hawkman's estate was the X mansion and he was confused for a second. So yeah, the experience of laughing at / with the film and the decent action and halfway decent visuals make it still a pretty entertaining watch ultimately. I mean, it's failing in some areas, but what film isn't these days? So at the end of the day, if you ask me which film is better, remember what I said at the beginning of this video. There's more than one way to make a good movie. It's perfectly possible for you to enjoy neither of them, or both of them, or one of them. Thank you for watching this video. Let me know what you think of Black Panther and or Black Adam, whether you've seen them or not, if you're going to see them or not. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe, comments. Comments are really helpful. I'd appreciate that. Share with your friends, and I will see you next time. Peace.